Hello and welcome to this week's What Were They Thinking? To begin this week, we go to space, more specifically the Sun, our Sun, and the possibility that there will be what scientists call a super flare in the next 100 years. Super flares, as most astronomers know them, are generally thought to only come from fast spinning young stars, unlike our rather slower spinning sun star. The scientists involved concluded this using new spectroscopic observations from the Kepler telescope. They found evidence of super flares from 43 stars like our own. The difference between the young star and the old star is that the young would have super flares every week or thereabouts. By comparison, a sun like our own would only experience a super flare once every few thousand years. This is important because a super flare could drastically damage a lot of technology we rely very heavily on now. Most technology does not like the magnetic radiation that comes from these flares. As many doomsday movies from Hollywood would lead you to believe, much technology would be damaged. Next we go to the Moon, where a very large and unexpected mass has been found under a crater on the Moon. No, it is not aliens, not unless they have a 2,500 kilometer wide ship. This was done by using lunar orbiter data that identified a significant gravitational anomaly. This 2,500 kilometer wide mass is also 300 kilometers deep and has a mass of about 2.18 quintillion kilograms. Unlike most asteroids like this that have hit the Moon, the mass has not sunk into the mantle and eventually into the core where it would have melted. Rather, it's remained embedded in the crust. At present, China's U2 rover is currently working its way to that location, where its ability to examine it on site may shed light. Coming closer to Earth, NASA has announced that it is opening the space station to tourism. If you are willing to spend $35,000 a night, you can gain use of the space station's facilities. That is use of the space station. It does not include travel, and who knows what companies will charge for transportation to and from the International Space Station. NASA believes that by doing this, they have opened the door for US industries' innovation and ingenuity that will accelerate a thriving commercial economy. Next we come back to Earth, but we are still focusing on the Sun, where researchers have figured out a significant flaw in the efficiency of solar panels. As you would know, solar panels are one of the leading contenders for green energy. Unfortunately, they have long been curtailed by about a 20% efficiency for the amount of energy that is put into them. One issue has always been that as solar panels produce energy, they become hot. As they become hot, they produce even less energy. Cooling has mitigated this, but has also been an energy draw, which has further reduced their efficiency. As a consequence, many researchers have looked at ways to improve their products mechanically. One of these has been identifying a defect in the silicon used to produce solar panels, in particular, the cells within the panel. This defect could cause the loss of up to 2% of the cell's efficiency. When you consider the sheer number of cells in a panel, that makes a lot of difference. The researchers used something called deep-level transient spectroscopy to find this problem. What they've found is that an electronic charge in the solar cell gets transformed from sunlight, but the flow of electrons gets trapped in turn. This reduces the electrical power that can be produced when the cells are first exposed to sunlight. This is where the engineering, design, and manufacture solutions are needed most. They will resolve this problem, which is a significant loss to the efficiency of the panel overall. While you have researchers looking for these solutions, you have members of the public in Canada attempting to step in and interfere with the scientific process. The poster gained some notoriety where it made a point of objecting to the use of facts, that the media had been distorting science, that equity has a place in science, not necessarily equity of opportunity or anything else, just equity. Then there's sustainability in science, but this was looked at through the lens of environmental, racial, and colonial justice. Only one of those could possibly be science. And then finally, there was women in STEM, which was recently addressed in an article by Quillette. You'll find a link to that article in the description below. As it is, the poster completely undermines and contradicts the purpose and point of science. Science is about those who know the field, have gone through the education, and apply it in an impartial and indifferent manner. It is not a form of activism. Next, there is a story coming out of the UK where students were triggered by a question about calorie counting in a maths test. The exam board has stated that students are able to complain about a question if they felt it was inappropriate. And frankly, there's nothing wrong with that. It is the underlying message to that statement that the question may have something wrong with it. And in reality, if the board were to take this seriously, they should simply tell the students that they have a right to drop out of education and come back when they can be an adult. The question in question is, there are 84 calories in 100 grams of banana. There are 87 calories in 100 grams of yogurt. Pretty has 60 grams of banana and 150 grams of yogurt for breakfast. Work out the total number of calories in this breakfast. This seems like a relatively straightforward sort of algebra. X amount of calories in banana, X amount of calories in yogurt. How much is in each percentage of the total? It is a practical application of algebra that students can understand and empathize with from their own life. The loud whiners have made a point that the question may have hurt those individuals who have in the past had dietary issues, such as being anorexic. The reality is, these people are a minority, and the question would actually be of benefit to many others trying to understand the same question. As it stands now, do these advocates believe you should completely isolate an exam question from reality, or should you attempt to keep a question tied into concepts, practices, and events that a student would be familiar with? In a similar vein of thinking, an article from The Conversation states that teachers who are addressing evolution need to think about their approach more carefully. The article argues that a large proportion of people in many countries do not believe in evolution. Whether this is religion, conspiracy, or a self-developed opinion on the topic. As a consequence, teachers who do cover evolution in their biology classes tend to either give a very simplified summary, which is often open to critique, or they provide a direct and irrefutable argument, which is where the problem lies. The article argues that those who come from a religious background are forced to choose between their religious belief or evolution when confronted with this stark reality. The author has put forward that teachers should cover evolution in the same way they would sex, pornography, ethnicity, religion, and terrorism. There's an argument to be made for this. On the other side of the equation is an argument for allowing natural selection to play its part. In medical news, a team of researchers from the University of Arkansas have successfully tested a laser that can kill cancer cells in the bloodstream. This non-invasive technology targets the bloodstream from outside the body, and as cancer cells go by, it kills them off. In one patient they studied, up to 96% of the tumor cells were destroyed. In related blood news, researchers may understand why arteries harden with age. Arterial hardening is a significant risk factor. It's normally associated with cardiovascular disease. This covers events like strokes, heart attack, arterial ruptures, plaques, and more. The important element here is arterial hardening is commonly associated with those plaques. The researchers examined a molecule called poly-ADP ribose. This is a protein that interacts with calcium in the bloodstream. It normally functions as a net where it catches wild calcium, binds it, and takes it away to be processed. However, in the case of arterial hardening, it binds very strongly with the calcium, creates a large droplet, and then solidifies on the arterial wall. This prevents the artery from expanding with blood pressure. If this happens too much, eventually the artery ruptures. The important part from this is not just understanding how the arteries harden, but rather a possible way to treat it. Minocycline is an antibiotic that's been in use for a long time. It's commonly used as a treatment for acne, and as it's already been approved as a therapeutic treatment, it would be a lot easier to get it adopted for this purpose. The problem is, we don't know what the side effects are from extended use, and a clinical trial is necessary for that. There is one other minor hitch to this research. It was funded by Pharmaceuticals, a company that specializes in finding drugs that have come off patent and then repurposing them. In a final bit of blood-related news, researchers may have found a way to convert all blood types into a universal blood type. As has been described in another video, blood is specific to a person, and only certain types can be shared between certain people. As a consequence, if you cannot find a matching blood type, a donation is possible, but the likelihood of an immune response is significantly higher, and this can create a problem in the form of a cascading negative effect. Type O blood is the best because nobody reacts to it. More specifically, type O negative blood. This is the universal blood donor, and if all blood that is donated could be made into type O blood, there is a good chance that the current shortage of blood in the world could be addressed. The researchers used an enzyme found in the lining of the digestive tract. This enzyme strips the surface markers from the red blood cell, specifically sugars, that allow it to then be considered the universal donor type. While looking at research, there's one study that looks at studies. More accurately, it looks at the punctuation used when giving them a title. If you have a hyphen, the chances of your study being identified and used in other research take a drastic step down. This work was done as a form of black box testing in which the researchers have only taken the article titles at face value. In response to the research, Clavariate Analytics has claimed that their own backed systems account for the hyphen in titles, and as a consequence, the results they show account for this particular variation that the researchers have identified. The researchers have responded saying that as Clavariate uses a system that is proprietary, they could not speak to it. They have reiterated that their work very clearly indicates that the hyphen has a significant effect in certain fields, the most pronounced of which are in biology and chemistry. Further to the name of titles in research, other scientists are raising concerns about a rogue actor starting a geoengineering war. As has been known for a long time, various governments have the capacity to alter the environment. This could be something as relatively innocuous as seeding rain clouds, or it could be something as drastic as massive geological changes like the Netherlands have done. Regardless of the purpose and intent, the reality is it is occurring. As a result, researchers from the United Nations Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change are concerned that should a rogue actor choose to do something, these could have catastrophic consequences for climate change. As it stands now, the concern is a rogue country like North Korea or a business with nefarious intent. Most countries are unlikely to act in a manner that is deleterious to their welfare and trade, as it would hurt them financially, politically, and ultimately possibly result in military action. As a result, the concern is that an independent actor may choose to pump CO2 into the atmosphere as an example, or seed clouds in an area that would then adversely affect another region.
It was in essence a sophisticated heat beam which we called a laser.
There is push for oversight for this reason. Further, most researchers believe that any individual actor attempting to do something could be stopped with action from countries or other responsible individuals. All of this mates into the issue of global warming, and as it stands now, we are unlikely to make the IPCC's 2020 goals of stopping global warming at 1.5 degrees. Part of this is driven by our push to ignore the most viable and effective options, something Macron is currently trying to do when he attempted to ban the use of glyphosate in France. Glyphosate is one of the most effective herbicides used in agriculture. It's not just used in agriculture, it's used practically by everyone at some point. This is because it is selective, effective, and overall reasonably priced. Macron was going to ban it and phase it out of France by 2021 in an effort to stop a possibly carcinogenic product being used. The reality is, there is little evidence in science to support that claim. The combination of safety, price, and efficacy is why farmers say there is no good alternative, and as a consequence, Macron has backed down on his initial plan. In 2017, he rejected a European Commission's decision to approve the continued use of glyphosate, and stated that he would ban the product within 3 years. This decision would drastically increase the cost of food in France, and unfortunately, that would only add to his problems with current pushback by the Yellow Vest protests due to the cost of living. In related agricultural news, researchers have been digging through rat feces in order to find the relationship between the use of GMO crops and the fecal microbiome. The gist of this is that various activists have raised concerns that the consumption of genetically modified foods has an effect on the microbiome of those who consume it. These investigations were intended to answer that question. They took Wistar rats and fed them GMO food. The food they fed them was a GMO variety at different concentrations of maize. Further, some of the food groups included Roundup application. The fecal bacterial population was then examined from these rat groups. There was no statistical difference in the fecal microbiome of these rat groups. This only adds to the safety of GMO crops and glyphosate. The next piece of news adds to this. Retraction Watch and Zotero are teaming up to collaborate in the production of a retraction identifying add-on to the open source citation tool. Zotero is a tool that is used to keep your articles organized. It allows you to create a database and knowledge management system. You can then use this to add citations to your work or keep a record of them. Either way, until recently, you more or less had a library. This library did not update. With the cooperation with Retraction Watch, it is possible that Zotero can now identify and tell you when articles you are using as the basis for your work and are being cited within your work have been retracted, and you can react accordingly. In some cases, this may make a significant change to either your approach or the underlying argument for your work. Retraction Watch has a database of 19,000 retractions, which is far more than are available through most other services. As a consequence, this collaboration will be a powerful tool. Finally, to touch on the New York Times hit piece about YouTube and radicalization. The intellectual dark web is a group of academics and experts who are not necessarily ideologically aligned, but are also not beholden to a single group identity. The supposed gist of this article was that a relatively uneducated member of the general public began as a right-wing conservative. Then they were eventually exposed to the intellectual dark web, which is supposed to have made them more right-wing. The reality is, looking at the graph data, there is clearly a pattern that after exposure to the independent thinking and non-radicalization of what could be considered a moderate field or the intellectual dark web, this right-wing individual became more liberal. And therein lies the problem with the entire article. The New York Times piece is fundamentally flawed in its conclusion, even though the data they rely on does not support it. Overall, it is just another hit piece, but it is a hit piece that has attempted to follow all the trappings of proper research without seeming to understand what they are. Thank you for watching this video. If you have found it interesting, consider liking, sharing, and subscribing. Please post any comments, questions, or suggestions below.